Hello and welcome. This is Jeffrey Bird, and this is Jeffrey Bird Coaching. And today I have a very, very special guest that has the most amazing stories. And she's an incredible storyteller and has some really inspiring stories to tell you. And if you go on Amazon and look her up, you'll be scrolling for a while because she's got a lot of books there. So Gloria Burgess is her name. And I have one of her most recent books. Let me get the glare off of it, called Pass It On. And this is an easy read. It's made so simple that children can read it, but boy, does it have a message for adults too. So Gloria, I want to introduce you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks for having me. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. And thanks for inviting me to talk about this book, Pass It On. As you know, this material about my father, which is the focus of the book, is near and dear to my heart. And so I just maybe like to share a little bit about why I wrote the book and then what it's about. And then we can just take it from there. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great. Looking forward to it.
All right. So my father's name is Ernest McEwen Jr. And I don't know, maybe about 25 years ago, I asked my mother if I could have her blessing, her permission and her blessing to write a story about my dad. And I had no idea what that meant at the time, Jeff. I just knew that God was impressing on my heart that, this was a story that needed to be shared with other people beyond our family. For many years, it was just a family story, right? It was something that happened in our life. And so the heart of the story, again, focuses on my father. And when he was a little boy, my father, he had two burning desires, two dreams that God impressed upon his heart. One of those dreams was to live in a house with running water. And one of his dreams, another dream, was to go to college. Now, my dad was born in the rural South in the 1930s. And so this was the deep South, Jim Crow South. And this was a world that was not designed for Black people to thrive. Let's just put it that way, right? But that didn't stop my dad from dreaming. And he was he was just such an outgoing person. He would talk to anybody about his dreams. So even as a little kid, he's talking to people about his dreams. And of course, the people around him, they love him. So they're encouraging him, right? But they're probably thinking, what is he thinking?
Right.
Right? But my dad was a reader, and so he loved books. He couldn't go to the public libraries because Blacks could not do that in those days in the South. But he would fish books out of the trash. He would borrow them from his teachers. He would save any little pennies or pocket money, that he earned selling seed packets to, be able to buy used books, right? And so, my dad is now in his early 20s, and he's working as a janitor at the University of Mississippi. He lives in Oxford, Mississippi, and he's working as a janitor there because Ole Miss is still segregated, but he can work there. And my father is still hanging on to that dream, right? So he's still talking about it, and he talks to the students, to the professors, to anybody who'd listen. And I always think of that little game called telephone tag, where somebody tells somebody, and somebody tells somebody else, and somebody tells somebody else. And so one of those somebodies was one of the deans at University of Mississippi, and he wanted to meet my dad. He had heard about his story, and he wanted to meet him. And when he did, and heard my dad's dreams, and he met him, and he, saw this energetic young person, very full of energy and determination and faith, he said, "Young man, Mr. McEwen, I know somebody who can help you with your dream." And so that person, Dr. Leston L. Love is his name, the dean, introduced my dad to William Faulkner, who, of course, lived at Roanoke. That introduction was a turning point in my father's life. So in those days, we didn't have cell phones, right? So you couldn't pick up the cell phone and call somebody, right? But my dad walked up to Roanoke, met Faulkner. Faulkner heard my dad's dreams, and he saw again that that fire in his spirit. And he said, "Mr. McEwen, I'd like to help you with your dream. Where do you want to go to college?" And my dad said, without missing a beat, he said, Alcorn, A&M. And he said, that's a really fine school for Blacks. And Faulkner said, "I want to pay for your tuition. I want to pay for your room and board. I know that you're married with, 3 little girls. So I want to help Millie find a job and you find a job so you don't have to worry about pocket money. And oh, by the way, we'll send clothing for the girls." And my father just, he was, I'm sure, stunned, right? And very surprised and very grateful. But he said, "No, sir, I can't accept your offer." And at that time, my father couldn't see how he would be able to pay Faulkner back. And he shared that with Mr. Faulkner. And Faulkner just looked at him. He said, "Mr. McEwen, I don't expect you to pay me back." He said, "All I expect is that, when you have an opportunity, when things, change for you, that you pass this blessing on to somebody else." Well, let me tell you something, Jeff. He picked the right person. Because that's what my dad would have done anyway. I mean, he spent the rest of his life talking about education, encouraging his sisters, his any relative, any friend, any coworker, any neighbor who would listen to, if you're still in high school, go to community college. If you haven't gotten your high school degree, get your GED, right? If you are in grad school, go get your doctorate. He was always encouraging people to get their education. And when he could, he offered, some kind of financial assistance as well. He was never, flush or rich by any sense of the word in terms of finances, but he was rich in spirit. And so I remember just, so clearly when my dad passed, the pastor at our church invited the immediate family in for, final prayers before the memorial service. And he was just shocked when the chapel just filled. I mean, just filled to overflow with people who considered themselves family because they had been so blessed by my father and his passing it on. So that's the story that's in the book. There's a lot more detail in the book. There are amazing paintings, illustrations in the book. So I hope that you are inspired to read it.
Yeah, I hope so too. The book is beautiful. And like I said, it's an easy read. And I know, Gloria, you've done a lot of work even with children sharing this story, but it's not just a story for children.
No.
It is a story. The book might be designed that way, but it makes it an easy read, but it is designed for everybody. And
everybody, that's right.
Like Gloria, like we were talking just before we started recording, it's really a story about, number one, faith, and
Yes.
number two, perseverance.
Yes.
And your dad, Ernie, it's just touching how, the deck was stacked against him in so many ways. And it's like, he didn't even care. It's like, he didn't even take that to heart. He's like, "Nope, I've got a dream, I've got a vision, and I'm moving towards it." And
that's right.
If something comes against it, it's like, okay, well, whatever, what's next? What's my
Exactly.
next appropriate step that I can take toward
Exactly.
the realization of that vision? And
Yeah.
and it's, and the thing that I think is so beautiful about that is there were such unseen things that he could in no way have known.
No.
He couldn't have known that William Faulkner would come along and fund his
No.
scholarship, and pay for the living expenses of the family, and he didn't want anything back, but he couldn't have known that up front.
No.
So to think about it, like so often, I think we're all in that situation. There's connections just waiting to happen when we have the right heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Jeff, I think you nailed it because, not only did my dad have faith, but he also understood the power of gratitude. And, a lot of times we overlook the, gratitude. We think it just means thank you, but it also just means living life with a sense of a full heart, with a sense of, a generosity of spirit, if you will. And that's how my dad lived his life. He was so grateful to have God in his life. He was so grateful to have this vision. And he had no idea, like you said, how this vision would be realized because, he was the first person in his family who had dreamed, I'm going to say out loud, and dreamed outside of forget about the box, but he dreamed outside of the building, right?
Right.
and he had that faith and a belief, just absolute belief in God, and just realized that this wasn't really about him anyway. This was about God helping him fulfill his vision. Although again, he had no idea of how. And as well as I do that God doesn't give us a beacon; He gives us a flashlight, right?
I wish it were a beacon sometimes.
Wish it were a beacon, right? But it's like a little bitty flash,
Right.
little bitty flashlight. But Dad just kept going and kept going. And here's what I have learned as well. When we trust in God and when we give it to Him, and if it is for us, if that vision is for us, and I don't think God gives you visions that are not for you, right? If
Right.
it is for us, and you keep on keeping on, you keep that you keep persevering, those dreams will be realized. And at least for me, my perspective about this kind of dream, which was way bigger than my dad, you need other people to help you fulfill your dream, and of course, as a little kid, he probably, wouldn't have had the logic to put all of those things together, and neither did I. But as an adult, I'm looking backwards now, and I'm going, that's yeah, right. And and so I know that when we move, Providence moves too.
Wow, Gloria, I love that. And I love what you said. I've always, when I take my DISC personality test, I'm an IDC and other types, I don't know everybody knows what that means, but it means I'm very independent. And,
Yes.
the older I get, the more I realize, boy, most of the mistakes that I have made in my life came from not receiving from the
Mm,
other people who were willing to
mm,
give.
mhm.
And now, but thank heavens for second chances.
Yeah.
Now I just look at the people around me like you, and I'm like, wow, how did this happen? How am I at the table with these people? It's like somebody must have paid somebody. It's like this is just so amazing. And
Yeah.
but and so what I think is that it's never just for us. It's like moving from me to we. Like John
Yes.
Maxwell talks about, and I know you're very associated with him. So now, what your dad did, it might have seemed like just his vision and his dream at the time, but it's now spread out all over the world through you. You've spoken all around the world. You speak
Mm,
on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
yeah.
You've spoken with John Maxwell on his team and the stage before, and so you've got all of these arenas in which to share this
Yeah.
message. So one person planted the seed, and now there's
Yes.
this huge harvest springing up, and it's like, wow, how did that come from one seed? But that's just
Yeah.
how it works.
That's how it works. Yeah.
So yeah, and so, but I know there was more to his story too. Even recently, and even since his passing, there's recently been an amazing twist of events. So his influence is even going on and still being recognized. So could you tell us a little bit about what's happened recently in that twist of events?
Absolutely, Jeff. And I just want to say one thing about the ripple effect of that one seed. And I know I'm mixing metaphors here, but when you water the seeds, they just keep growing and growing and growing. And I'm gonna, say flowing out into the world. And who knew? Who knew that I would have this kind of platform, right, as an adult to reach so many people globally? So I want to just come back and share the rest of the story, so to speak. So my father got to Alcorn. He enrolled that fall, with my mom, Mildred McEwen, Millie, and me and my two older sisters with him. So we were there at Alcorn with him, and he went through. He excelled as a student. His focus was math and the sciences and technical areas, right? So he thought he was going to be an architect when he graduated, and that was his plan. Well, about 3 months before graduation, my father, who was also the president of the student council, uh, took a stand for civil rights for the entire student body. He was expressing his own personal beliefs, but he was also speaking on behalf of the student body about a significant civil rights issue that had emerged at Alcorn involving one of the professors there. And at the time, they also had a board of trustees that were all white, right? And so as a result of speaking up and speaking out, my father was amongst a handful of people that the trustees basically said, if you don't stop what you're doing, this protest, we're gonna, we're gonna expel you from Alcorn. And that's exactly what happened. In those days, they called it ousting. And what that means is when you're ousted, you cannot return to that to that place. So he was kicked out of Alcorn for his actions. He was given 24 hours to leave, never to return. And so 3 months from graduation, right? And so over the years, I know that it wore on my father. Alcorn was, a beloved place for him, right? And he was not able to complete his education there. And so my sisters and I have had, many, many conversations about Dad, of course, and about Alcorn. And I'm, the spokesperson, I'm the storyteller in the family. And so I reached out to Alcorn a number of years ago, just to make contact, let them know that, the family was here, interested. And then I reached out recently, just last year, Jeff, to the president. And I said, we need to address this. And I told her the story, shared the book with her, shared some of my dad's contributions at Alcorn, and asked for a conversation, with her. She was so gracious. Her name is Dr. Felicia Nave. She, we had a wonderful conversation, and she said, Dr. Burgess, she says, I didn't know this part of Alcorn's history, and she said, and I'm an alum. And I said, oh, wow, really? She said, but what you're pointing out, she said, is amazing. And your father, I mean, he was such a leader here. I don't understand why we don't know anything about this. So long story short, I said, well, what can we do? And she said, well, we're going to fix this. And she said, we are going to fix this. She said, we need to make things right. And so what we were hoping for as a family was that he would get some sort of completion degree and recognition for, his many contributions there. And Dr. Nave just surprised us all when she granted an honorary doctorate degree posthumously to my dad. And then a few weeks later, she invited me to be the keynote speaker for commencement. I thought, oh, mercy, which of course I did. And it was just such a blessing to be in that place again as an adult, because I was very young in nursery school at the time when my dad was there. So I went back, I gave a keynote, accepted the degree. And Jeff, talk about, that seed being sown. Now, more people than ever know about, my father, about Faulkner's generosity. And I'm going to say about just the human heart, because it takes two ordinary people, Faulkner and my dad, to do the extraordinary at a time in our country and in our nation's history when that simply was not, it certainly wasn't a usual thing to happen, right? It was very unusual. And so now people know more about, how, how human beings can be and should be, in my humble opinion, in terms of, just honoring the birthright dignity of each one of us, of each person.
Yeah, and that story, the other thing that I'm impacted by is the way you've approached it. You approach these things. I mean, there were a lot of injustices that came to your dad, but the way you approach it is with gentleness and kindness and patience and wanting everybody to be built up.
Yes.
not just, my wife always says a rising tide floats all boats. So
Yes.
it's like you're bringing the tide, and it
Yeah.
just lifts all the boats. And it's just this warmth and this joy that come through you, and you're just exuding that. And I can't help think of a biblical reference. So if you're not into that sort of thing, just bear with me for a minute. But Moses, everybody knows Moses, but God did not let him enter the promised land. Yet he showed up on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus right in the middle of the promised land, even after he passed.
Yes.
And that just makes me think of your dad. His promised land, was what he was trying to do with Alcorn and, and the doctorate from there. And he was deprived the ability to do that. But the story wasn't over.
No.
There was more even after the fact, even after his passing, that came along. And now he's got you to just blossom it out and spread it around the world. So I think that's just beautiful. Both the story are beautiful and the way you present it, the whole attitude, the posture, the spirit, if you will, of the way you do that is just heartwarming. And it's just, who says miracles still don't happen?
Hey. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know people might want to get in touch. I did see an email link on your website at gloriaburgess.com. Is that the preferred way for them to get in touch?
Yes, they can just send me an email. Use my first name, Gloria, at
Okay.
gloriaburgess.com. It'll get to me. Yes.
Okay, that's great. And also, I saw that the book is on your website too, so people can go to that, just gloriaburgess.com. Also, if you have an event coming up and need a speaker, Gloria's got some amazing things to talk about and stories to tell. I know this is just a little snippet of all that she's got. So this is just a picture, and she's got a list of things on her website too that she can definitely speak to at your next event. So I highly recommend you reach out if that is of interest. And definitely, let me show it again. Here's the book, Pass It On, the story that she was just telling about. And this is the quote from William Faulkner, was to her dad, Ernie, to pass it on. And he certainly has done that through Gloria and to all the people around the world that she's impacting. So, Gloria, thank you so much for being here today and for just being you, and for telling this story that is so encouraging, because we all, there must have been some really discouraging times for your dad. And I think we all experience those at times where it's just like the death of a dream. And
Yes.
I heard one person say there's always the birth of a vision, the death of a vision, and then the supernatural fulfillment of a vision. So you've been through all of those. You watched
Yes.
it in your dad, how his vision was birthed, how it seemed like it was going to be fulfilled, but it died, and then how it has now been, through your perseverance, supernaturally fulfilled. So
Amen. Amen.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for having me as a guest. And I just want to appreciate you as well for all that you are putting out into the world. I appreciate you as a human being. I appreciate you as a fellow leader. And I just love your ministries and how you are just putting so much goodness and light out into the world. So thank you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Gloria. And yeah, it's good to be in the canoe paddling in the same direction with you.
Yes, amen.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much. And to everybody watching, I definitely recommend that you check out gloriaburgess.com for the book and for her other resources. So thanks so much for tuning in.